Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of podcast, The Art of Beyond the Algorithm, TABA, the podcast that we do to discuss with the professional engineers and data scientists around their career and try to understand the soft skills and meta level skills and first-hand experience of they have gained through their career, etc. Today is 7th of August 2025, third episode of the podcast. And as I said, I have a very special guest, my friend and old colleague, Dave Keeshan. He has accepted my invitation. Thanks, Dave, for accepting my invitation and joining the podcast. Let's kick
Thanks
it
very
off.
much. Thanks for having me on board. Yeah, I've been a kind of a fan of afar from your other podcast, but I'm an Iranian, so I haven't been able to follow them.
Yeah, as you said, and maybe the audience they don't know, I have started podcasting 2 years ago, but in Persian. I interviewed 140 professionals, mostly in data science and AI. It was fascinating, the experience and the community we built, around 150,000 people. We could get together around the discussions and conversation, which was really fascinating. People always ask me, why you don't do that in English? You want to listen that
Mm.
internationally? And I said, here we go. That's the podcast. Yeah, very good. Okay, so let's start with your current. What do you do these days, Dave? What is your profession? If you can tell us.
well, I'm, as you can tell from my accent, Irish, but and also living in Ireland, but that hasn't always been true. I graduated from a UCC. Um, I was I got a first class honors degree for microelectronic engineering from University College Cork, and most people know that the most important word in that sentence is Cork. Uh,
Yeah.
Cork's a very special place. But yeah, I came out just right the dot-com bubble was going, and microchip design was huge in Ireland. It was like one of these weird things that Ireland was very competitive in. And a significant portion of my graduating class, which was like 60 people in UCC back in '98 for 1 year. So that type of number, you'd be lucky to get maybe 10 electrical engineers per year these days. It's really fallen off in Ireland. But we all kind of, I think I had three job offers before I left college, and that wasn't unusual. We all kind of were very in high demand. We were a low cost country in Europe. We spoke English. We were producing something uh, that was kind of could be done here. We design services, a lot of design services. So I ended up in microchip design. I moved to Dublin to work for a company called Silicon Software Systems, or S3, which is kind of sort of famous in that space. It was one of the first. It was set up in the '80s for design services, and I they had a kind of a view towards America and Europe, but I was more interested in America. So I got within a year of graduation, I got sent to America and was working with Bell Labs in New Jersey. And if anyone watches that TV show Severance, that bizarre building that they work in, that's a real building. That was Bell Labs, and that was the building I worked in for 2 years. And we were working on Ethernet switches and IP and ATM switches, what they were called at the time. But Lucent, Bell Labs, Lucent had done all this research in the '80s on fiber optic stuff, and then this internet thing came along, and so well, we gotta use up our patents before they expire. So they were doing a lot of research into that. But this was during the dot-com, like literally during the dot-com bubble, and there was people sitting beside me who had shares, who were watching them just like going, just crashing. They'd spend the entire time like this, But I was lucky in that I was too young to have anything, so it didn't really matter to me that the companies were kind of going under. It wasn't losing that many shares. But then I kind of spent a few years there, and the bubble kind of crashed, and the S3 was looking for um, people like either redundancies or sabbaticals and stuff like that. And I decided to, and my partner, who was my wife now, but she was also in the same company, and she decided to take the time, and I decided to take time. We decided to go to Australia for a year, and the says, "I'll see you in a year." Uh, with they had like those working holiday visas. So I went off on a working holiday visa, which is only meant to be for a year, but I kind of had in my head that if I could get a permanent position, I was going to grab it. And I was lucky. We kind of had actually done some work with an Australian company, and I ended up working on the Australian side of an Irish project with a lot of the same people. And that was actually in printing. I spent significant amount of time. Originally, it was doing microchips for decompressing, compressed data streams for printers, for very fast printers. And then we kind of produced those microchips, and the chips were kind of ready, and the printers were taking a long time to come along. And I kind of started looking on the other side of like the quality analysis of the print heads themselves, and trying to see if, because they were having some quality issues, and trying to figure it out. And it was just kind of, it was the first time I was asked to take a different eye at something. And you had a lot of people who were stuck in this old world, and I kind of had a computery kind of analysis, big data analysis background, and this was kind of in computer vision. So I kind of became a minor computer vision expert on these old systems. But what we didn't realize ourselves even at the time, that AI and computer visions and machine learning was coming down the track like a freight train. And we were trying to kind of doing massive data analysis. So like they would have like this printout. If you've ever done this printout, if you ever buy a printer and it has those little printouts of nozzles, and sometimes they say put it on your scanner, that'll be a printout of like 200 nozzles. That's a quality scan of 200 nozzles. We had a printout at 70,000 nozzles. So the analytics to kind of calculate the 70,000, they could do it like in 3 or 4 minutes. But for production line, like 3 or 4 minutes was too long. We had to figure out how to get it down to like 30 seconds or less. So it was kind of, trying to figure out, improvements and analysis, and what was important, what wasn't. And there were these like LabVIEW systems that weren't really, they were built maybe for 200 nozzles. They weren't built for 70,000. So that was kind of very interesting. I ended up kind of doing more, Python development and things like that. And then that kind of company had its financial problems. I found myself unemployed with like a third of the company, and I just, I'd been working hard, a long time then, and I decided I took a few months off. But there was no real work in Australia at the time. It was just a quiet time. So my wife and I decided maybe it's time to come back. So I came back, and it was a very eye-opening thing. I thought no one would remember me, but in Ireland they never forget. And I was people knew who I was and my history, and you can't give a reference in Ireland because someone will have asked about you before you even get to them. So make sure you have your nose clean. And I kind of initially went into an FPGA design role. And then there was a startup company called Movidius that you as well were involved with. And I had known people in that company for years. So a lot of people think I worked there a lot longer than I did, because I kind of knew the people and the product. So I turned up one day, and I was telling people all this sort of stuff. When did you start? I was like, Tuesday, but I was kind of brought in to do something what they call emulation, which is, or sometimes it's called FPGA prototyping for ASICs. So you have a microchip, you will want to figure out kind of ideas about the product before you send a microchip off to manufacture, which can take like 3 months. And so we in Movidius were starting to kind of really get into the start of computer vision AI, computer vision machine learning, and neural nets were beginning to turn up then. And they wanted to see, well, can we do a neural net? Can the software handle it? Is the software able to handle the hardware? So that was kind of the initial work that we were prototyping for these chips. And after I was there 9 months, Intel arrived and decided to buy the company. And we continued on sort of as Movidius for a year. I'm telling you, this as well, but and then we all got moved out to Leixlip, which kind of suited me because I just live over in Selbridge. So I was like, yeah, I thought it'd be great if we go over there. And everyone was like, we like working in town. And
Yeah,
but
I was
spent a
one
few
of
years
those.
there.
Yeah, I
I think
was
I was
one
the
of
only one.
those.
I almost got myself mobbed one day. He's like, stop saying that. So I spent a few years there, found a kind of a different ecosystem. I kind of, Intel is a very much more structured environment. You have silos of work, silos of expertise. And we kind of, when you're in a startup, you're expected to be a kind of a domain, a cross-domain expert. So I found myself like, I'd be moving amongst 3 different worlds. And I'd turn up and, I'd be the emulation guy, but I was also the ASIC memories guy. And And what are you doing here? You're the FPGA guy. It's like, oh yeah, no, I do this too. You do this as well, and they really struggled with that. And
Yeah.
but I decided to kind of take my we kind of were supposed to be there for 4 years. I think I stayed 5, and then I decided to kind of go out more into the contracting space. So I've kind of been working around in a few companies now, helping them kind of bring acceleration for either FPGA products, where they kind of might want to accelerate an idea, or emulation again. So sometimes it's an ASIC that they want to kind of prototype before they tape out. So that's kind of and I found that that's a kind of it's a much more fantastic world now than it was even 10 years ago. It was a much more nice to have 10 years ago, and now people are getting it's a need to have. So it's a kind of it's an interesting skill set that not a lot of people have it, and people are looking for it. So it's kind of there's always seems to be work somewhere. So that's kind of quite good. And that's kind of what that's my day-to-day job. That's kind of my engineering background. And the other half of it is which you kind of alluded to is while I was in Australia. So I'm hoping I'm not speaking too fast, which is one of my big problems, which I found in Australia. But eventually I figured out how to slow down. I had to slow down for the Australians. Mate, we can't understand a word you're saying. But it was hilarious. And everyone thought I was funny, but they couldn't understand what I was saying. It's like, my God, how funny would I be if I actually slowed down and they could understand me? So I kind of, I'd been always thought I was a bit of a funny guy, or but he was like one of those guys that they call hurdles on the ditch. I go, oh God, that wasn't very funny. It's like, so who are you? So I actually went off and did a stand-up comedy course, and kind of ended up in the scene. You have like a graduation night, and found out like how it all worked. And it turns out comedy is really easy to get into.
Dave,
You just have to.
Dave, give me a second. Let's have a break here and let me ask you some questions because that's an
Noise.
interesting story.
Yeah.
I want you to go through that. Okay, so
Sure.
such a fascinating journey. You have had such a fascinating career. So I think we should be from the same generation, kind of. At that time, I remember doing electronic engineering was something everybody was interested in.
Mm,
So I did my undergrad in oh my God, it's really difficult to, 1992. I started my undergrad degree in electronic engineering. And I think that was the era of Moore law. At that time, you remember the size of transistors on a
hmm
chip could be twice every 2 years. And but I don't think as it progressed, I don't think we had that capacity to grow. And it affected a lot of careers in the electronic. So nowadays, I don't know if students are interested in doing electronic at all.
Um, I think they are. Well, like I've actually had this conversation a few times recently, but it used to be, you know, the line was is if you didn't know what you wanted to be in college, but you were good at maths, just do engineering and you'll figure it out. And there's quite a few people in my year who kind of they didn't know what they wanted to be when they arrived in college, but by the time they got to the end, they did. And one guy went off to become an accountant. Another one, a girl that was there, she went off and became like a proper project manager. But like I was fortunate. I'm a second generation engineer. My dad was one, and I actually found that it was kind of right. Like my mom wanted me to be an accountant, and I spent a week in my uncle's accountancy office when I was 16, and the only thing I came was like, I'm not doing that. So kind of, sort
What,
of grudgingly,
what was the reason behind that?
it was just not for me. It's not the type of maths I liked. It was not everyone knew I was good at numbers, but it was not that type of numbers. I didn't enjoy
It is
those
very
numbers.
interesting at that age you have had that clarity to know it is not something for me. Sometimes people are still in their older
Yeah,
age, still are struggling. So I'm really
I didn't
curious
know what
about
I
that.
wanted, but I just knew it wasn't that.
Uh-huh.
And then I was very fortunate when I got into engineering. I think it was within the first few months. I kind of, oh no, this is it. This way of figuring out a problem and doing it was just I was perfect for it, and I did quite well. But I think now if you're quite good at maths and you don't know what you want to be, you'll be pushed more to maybe data science, computer science, and the electrical engineering. I don't think it, and even then, I probably should have been a computer engineer, but computer engineering didn't exist in my college at the time. I think it did by the time I finished, but I imagine I wouldn't have gone into electrical engineering if a computer engineering was available, but it wasn't. So that's how I started there. But you're splitting hairs there a tiny bit because engineering is engineering. But there is something in microchip design. You kind of do need to have know the electronics and know the coding, and you kind of have to know quite a lot of different things. Particularly now, I mean, when we studied, I think it was I went in 94, came out in 98. Tunneling, electrons just disappearing and popping up were kind of out there, but they weren't that big a deal. Like one electron tunneling out of a potential well and popping up somewhere else wasn't that big a deal when a full potential well was like a couple of hundred electrons, whereas now it could be like 20 or 30 electrons, and these guys popping in and out become a much more significant problem. So understanding kind of those kind of quantum effects that are now beginning to become so much more dominant in microchip design, I don't think that would have necessarily been covered in the computer engineering course at the time. So you
Yeah.
know and then everyone's like starting to look into real quantum as well, and that's kind of one of the
Yeah.
next big areas.
Apart from how much the students are interested in doing electronic engineering and courses like that, the next question might be if we need that much engineers anymore. I mean, is it an industry still active like chip design, etc.? I know quantum computing is something on the table, but nobody knows what will be the future. Still, that's like a bubble. It seems like I don't know. But do you think we
It's
need
hard to
that
know.
much engineers?
Yes, but no. I mean, it's sort of like you need them, but where? Like I've found, that electrical, like, so I lived in Australia, I lived in Sydney. There's probably more microchip design jobs in Dublin than all of Australia. So a country doesn't need to have microchip design in it to be a successful economy. Some places can survive completely without it. And I found there's very few good jobs in microchip design in places with really nice beaches. It's just one of those things. If you'll find all like these, some weird part of the Netherlands or or Sweden, nice places, but you're not going to be sitting out in summer getting a tan very often. So the jobs do exist, but they're not guaranteed. So I know like somewhere
Yeah,
like Sydney is it's a finance town. So there's a lot more jobs around the finance. Now there has been a kind of a bit of a growth in jobs related to low latency trading. So some FPGA roles exist there now that didn't exist 10 years ago. But in the main, that's an example of a place where it's not very strong. And in the past few years, even Ireland has become too expensive for design services. You wouldn't do design services here anymore. It's all been farmed out to cheaper and cheaper places. So someone like me is competing potentially with Brazil or Serbia, and that's where that is, and it's kind of a double problem. It's sort of they're not going into universities to come out of universities, so the people aren't here. But if they were here, their costs would be too high, and maybe that's the
yeah,
back pressure effect that's why they didn't go in the first place.
yeah. For example, I remember when Intel acquired Movidius, I remember at that time, Intel had acquired another company exactly very similar to Movidius, but they were in the software side. They used to develop
Hmm.
like AI libraries, etc. They
Hmm.
acquired
Nirvana.
Movidius with like 300 million, etc. If we can reveal it, I think after 10 years, the information is public. But I remember
Hmm.
that company at that time was acquired more expensive, and they have built the company in like 4 years, while Movidius had was at least 10 years plus. So all of this is the question people who are in the field. For example, a friend of mine has finished his PhD in electronic and doing a postdoc in like sensor design, etc. He's facing all the time with the uncertainty of I'm wasting my time. Should I switch to like AI and those fields, etc.? All this dilemma are on the table. What do you
Yeah,
think?
well, I've had this. This is a bit of a tangent, but it does come back. Like, so, one of the big problems being a hardware designer versus a software designer was, a lot of to do hardware design, you needed like these access to all these expensive licenses, what they call EDA tools. Cadence or Synopsys or well, Model Sim, Mentor Graphics were owned by Siemens. I get confused now what to call them, but those
Mhm.
guys, and if you wanted to get your hands on those licenses, they're very expensive. Um, so if I'm at the weekend and I want to try out an idea, and program something up, it's very hard. It was very hard. And but like if you want to do something with software, you get a Linux machine, you got Python, you got Java, whatever. Boom, that's it. You have all the tools to build a world class company there. There's nothing stopping you but your own ability. Whereas in hardware, you were kind of limited by the tools. Now, in recent years, there has been growth in something that they call open EDA. So these tools like simulators and synthesis tools that are finally available that you can kind of download and get going. And that's an area I've been exploring a lot recently. And they're not as good. You get what you pay for in some ways, but at least you have access. At least someone can prototype an idea and can kind of maybe start something themselves and kind of see if there's something in there that they like, see if there's something to kind of grab onto an idea and experiment. And you are beginning to see people kind of maybe do little AI accelerators that they can plug into a RISC-V processor and just kind of understand like how an accelerator might be done. And that might be some IP that you could then kind of develop and go from there. And it's still kind of a small enough, it's still not massive yet, but I tell you, it's a lot better than nothing.
Mm.
Now I do know like there was some cases like universities would get you access to these like student versions of them, which is sort of nice, but it still I don't think catches those people at the weekend who maybe have finished university but they're not quite too long in their career and they don't have that has kind of been lost, and I think now it's finally beginning to grow. So
Yeah.
it is interesting in Europe with all this chips money. There is a kind of a big kind of wajimers that they want to kind of maybe fund these open ADA tools as well. So I think they've identified it as kind of a potential area that if they kind of invest in, it might kind of be of benefit to the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. That's very interesting topic. I don't know if it is silence before the storm or something. Recently, I've seen there are some initiatives. They are doing like virtual edge AI labs, etc. I mean, from here, you can start developing something on an edge device somewhere in the world. Seems like it's growing at the moment. There's a European project called the AI Edge. So the whole idea is they have created a virtual lab. If you want to develop something on Intel platform, for example, you don't need to buy it anymore. So that's
Hmm.
different from the chip manufacturing industry, semiconductor industry, but still that's related to hardware. Anyway, passing from this topic, what grabbed my attention was the adaptation along your career. I mean, whatever, like the dot-com bubble, and then slowly going toward FPGA, and then computer vision, and then AI, and then everything looks like it shapes the career for us. Sometimes it looks like we don't have any control on what area to stay. It looks like the market appeals and we should follow. What do you think about that? Do you think we should, is it natural, or should we have a little bit of autonomy to take the control and say, no, I don't want to go to this direction. I want to stay. What do you think about that?
Well, I'd love to say I had kind of a lot of control in my career. I quite liked microchip design. I liked the microchip design that was being done 25 years ago when I first came out. But you could do a microchip with maybe about 10, 15 people back then. Whereas when we got into Intel, I think we were fielding a team of 200 engineers just on the hardware side and maybe another 100 on the software side. So that kind of obviously has problems of a company, the size of companies that can kind of support like that type of workforce. Obviously, it becomes more and more limited. But the main thing is you do find that the expectation that you become a cross domain expert kind of narrows. When there's so many people,
Yeah.
there's typically going to be someone else that does that. No, that person does that. No, that person does that, and I think that was kind of what I was reacting to a tiny bit. I for me, who's a we call ourselves ASIC designers or silicon designers. I still call myself that, even though 90% of my work is FPGAs now. Um, and a lot of people think that's a different job, which I find like amazing that a lot of ASIC designers think FPGAs are a different thing. It's nearly identical, and but like you can kind of develop an idea in the morning and be kind of tweaking it in hardware in the afternoon. It's such a like I'm amazed a lot of people don't kind of get into it more because when you finish a chip, which can take a year, 18 months, and then you tape it
Yeah.
out, and then it takes 3 months to come back. to actually have a feedback of like of such a short cycle can kind of it just blow your mind, you know. Um, so I kind of I went into it like maybe naively thinking it was going to grow. I didn't quite grow as much as I thought. It did grow, but I thought people would kind of get the memo and go, "Oh my God, look at this!" This was during the time. Excuse me. This was during the time when crypto was coming along, and without kind of getting into the crypto bro aspect of crypto, but what happened in crypto was you could mine it on your computer, then you could mine it on a GPU on your computer, then you could people were putting it onto FPGAs, and then people were starting to tape out ASICs for acceleration. So FPGAs kind of had a very significant moment in there that people realized, oh,
Yeah.
this is something that you know, is better than a GPU. And I think that was kind of where I kind of woke up to like how significant like a pillar it could be inside an industry. Now, crypto just blew away after
Yeah.
that. I think that the notch of time to an FPGA was kind of significant inside that world was like months, but it was significant. It was interesting. I just as an aside, I had a job recently. I had to blow up an FPGA to figure out like how hot it would run before it would kind of crash, you know. And I just went off and got one of those crypto algorithms and just kind of just ran it as you know, and because that's all they're designed to do is run hot, and it kind of nuked itself about 150 degrees and said, well, yeah, that's how it goes.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually one of the meta level skills younger generation are facing in their career in the technical roles, because there are a lot of trends, everything every day coming up, and they are like uncertain about which direction they should follow, and so on and so forth. So have a little bit of autonomy, understanding, no, it is not mine. This is mine. Or should I follow this? Should I skip this
Well,
this direction?
I've been having this kind of more philosophical problem with careers and universities. Like universities, if you kind of go back, they used to have this thing called classical education. You'd go
Yeah,
in and you'd learn the philosophies and you'd learn, you know, the great literature, and what the university was supposed to be doing was producing, you know, a rounded education person, and that you weren't going out to work, you know, in the bank or anything. You know, you were meant to be kind of have the skill set that you would work in anything. It was kind of originally what it was. Whereas now, you know, particularly for like the likes of engineering or accountancy or law, you're kind of brought in and you're nearly kind of it's like an enhanced technical college. You know, you know,
specialty versus
but,
generalist,
but
kind of.
very special. Like, you know, an engineer should be an engineer, whereas, you know, good luck me trying to be civil engineer or, you know, some, you know, a chemical engineer. You know, it was meant to be kind of that you kind of learn the elements of, you know, ingenuity, which we're always told that's where it comes from, the Latin. That's where engineer comes from, not engine. But you know, that what you know, what I kind of find now, where you know, particularly late in your career when you're more generic and maybe less specialized, it's like you come into a problem and it's like, well, how do we solve this problem? You know, like what do we know and what do we not know, and how do we figure out the bits that we don't know? And I think that's what a real engineer like used to be and probably should still be. So, you know, like I have this joke, you know, it's like, you know, it's like, you know, I'm terrified my kid's going to come in to me and say, Daddy, I want to be a prompt engineer. You know, it's like, you'll be a wearable engineer like your dad and you'll like it, you know. And there's like these kind of weird, weird roles. Um,
That's a
and,
big
you know,
challenge.
and
Yeah,
now
that
prompt
that's
engineer is disappearing and it's context engineer. And it's like, well, shouldn't it just be engineer? You know, there should be some fundamental
very
skills
interesting.
that should cross them all.
They should be adaptable. I mean, based on the changes in the market, you should have a skill set to bring it somewhere else and start like performing. Yeah, that's very interesting topic. That's very interesting topic, and it has got really complicated. As you said, like 30 years ago, being generalist was much easier, because was nowadays you need to have some sort of the speciality at the end of the day. So maybe that T-shaped model has formed to solve that, to address that problem and challenge.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think what I've described is a dead end. I think this specialized engineer or specialized accountant or specialized lawyer are dead. I think AI is actually coming for the specialization. Um, I think
Oh,
if you
that's
want to be any of these roles, I think you need to be a bit more general, and I think you need to have better people skills. I think you need to be a better communicator. I think some people used to be excellent at sitting in front of a computer and horrible people skills, and they could be quite successful. I think those people are going to be in big trouble. That's what all it's all they have, and the ability to kind of I think you will find people who have that those people skills and engineering, will be perfectly fine, as long as they are willing to make the change, and that's I think that's what we arguably should be kind of working better at, and bringing the kind of more social aspects to
yeah.
like it. This is a kind of related, like, so when I went to Australia initially, I joined the surf club there, which is a volunteer organization that you patrol the beach. And I was always a strong swimmer. I used to like do kind of like water skiing and canoeing and all that sort of stuff in college. So it was always something I was into. But it was really interesting to be on this. Like, so I was on Bondi Beach, which is the most famous beach in Australia. It's 10,000 people a day at high summer. And but it's the volunteer aspect. We don't have anything quite like that in Ireland, where getting your bronze medallion is considered a rite of passage for Australians. But and then you patrol, you volunteer at the weekends, and you'll do a few patrols, like a year, about 40 hours a year, and you'd be on the beach, and you're just like keeping an eye out, and you're trained to kind of do CPR and do spinal rescues. But when you get there, it's like jellyfish stings and lost children. Yeah, that's mainly what you do. um but what the main thing that I got from it was, particularly as a new immigrant into a country like that, was that I got to be part of the community. I got to meet loads of different people. Like, when you're in your industry, you probably know loads of engineers, but you mightn't necessarily know anyone else. Whereas that was a kind of, I'd be patrolling with a guy who's a postman, and another guy who's a CEO of a company. It was a huge gamut of experience, and then it was also like an amazing way to network. Well, okay, the club I had was quite famous. So, John Howard was kind of the prime minister at the time, and Malcolm Turnbull were members. So there was like a gateway to the prime minister of Australia, if you kind of wanted to get to that person there. But it kind of showed me that, if you're involved, you kind of, you'll know people that know people. And now Ireland's notorious, like, within about three people you can kind of get to anybody. So
Very
but yeah,
interesting. Very
getting out
interesting.
and mm, go
Yeah, very interesting. I want to say very interesting. It reminds me the recent article that I was reading. It was a comparison between IQ, EQ, and SQ. Like social intelligence looks like emotional intelligence is the thing everybody needs to have, but it looks like there is something else which is called social intelligence. The example you mentioned is a good example of that. But it looks like engineers, technical people, younger generation nowadays, they lack a lot. I mean, they are not good communicator. They are not good social person.
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't need to be, because they're not really being employed for their personality. They're being employed for their technical skill, which kind of goes back to what the universities are producing,
Yeah,
and you're not really, you can get that kind of dead-eyed engineer, that kind of, if you ask them the right question, you'll get the answer you want, but if you don't, and um and that can be hard to deal with, particularly when you kind of move up to management. It's like, how you manage these people. It's like trying to herd ferrets. um but like I wonder if yeah, that time that time will change now. That, I mean, those people exist, those people in the industry, but if you're coming out of university now, I don't know if that's where your strengths need to be anymore.
yeah, very interesting. Okay, so it is. I paused you when you were talking about getting involved in the stand-up comedy, but was
Mm.
it something exactly what we are discussing? I mean, was some sort of the motivation or energy pushing you forward doing something? Why stand-up comedy? And tell us
Um,
what happened and what was your
oh,
journey?
it was a few things. I suppose. So I spent some time in America, which I said, and you spend a time in America, you find your accent kind of changing. You have to talk their way, and but I found in Australia that they never wanted me to hide my accent. They always enjoyed the Irish accent.
Maybe there are a
Americans didn't
lot
hate
of
it.
maybe that's because there are a lot of Irish in Australia or
Oh,
something.
I just like it.
Yeah.
I've never understood. They've told me that loads of times. They just like our accent, and I've never understood it. And then I might hear a Scottish person, and I go, oh, "Okay, I think I get it now." But not a South African. Sorry, South Africans. That's a harsh accent. But there was a I don't know if there's a Stephen King book Stephen King wrote about it. It's called On Writing, and he sort of says in every person's life they read one book where they go, I don't know if I can write, but I know I can write better than that. And I'd seen people out and they were kind of doing these crappy jokes, and their timing was all off, and it's like, okay, look, I don't know if I'm very good, but I just think I'm better than that. And so I kind of started kind of just getting out and just it's amazing. Like we used in this uh, pub club that we live nearby. They do a trivia night, and we used to do trivia every Tuesday. And they had this sort of uh, joke competition, and someone had to go up and tell a joke. And I just always would have a joke ready, and I used to go up and I'd win half the time. And that's why I sort of said, like, people would go, I have no idea what you said, but it was hilarious. And so I said, well, if I could tailor this. So I eventually started writing some of my own bits of material, going up and telling a joke. They were usually related to the area. I remember this one guy like, "You wrote that bit yourself."
I'm wondering what
Um,
that has been the topic at that era. I mean,
Pardon?
what has been the topic of the jokes at that time? I mean, it should be really weird nowadays.
Well, yeah. Well, in this case, it was kind of it's a joke I still do now. There was a TV show that was on. It was on TV3. It's called Bondi Rescue, and they were filming it down on the beach. We would be on the beach when they'd be filming it. So I kind of they weren't allowed to film us because we were surf lifesavers. So their cameras would try and avoid us as much as possible. But I got really annoyed. Like anytime there's Irish people on the TV show, they'd have subtitles along the bottom, and that's not a joke. They really would. And and I'd be there, and I'd be standing on the beach dressed as a surf lifesaver and ready to go out. It's like, so the sort of joke was is that I go up and say to him, "I find it offensive that you feel a need to subtitle us," and he turns
Yeah.
to me, "What?"
Yeah. Okay.
So
How did it go? I mean, you were saying you started taking some courses in the
so
beginning.
yeah, so I kind of went and did a course, and then I did a graduation night, and then it was at the graduation night I found out it's really easy to get into comedy. You just sign up, and you get stage
Always there
time,
are,
and
yeah,
you just do
always
your
there are
5 minutes.
people, always there are people who are interested to listen to your jokes. That's what you're
Oh no,
saying.
they'll have comedy nights. They'll have comedy nights, and all you got to do is just get on the bill, and they'll put you on. You don't have to prove that you can be funny. You don't have to do anything. You just get on, and it's very easy to ask. You might not get on for like weeks and weeks, but like you go on a list and you get on. And I found out that's what people are doing. They're just going out and doing it. And so I started doing it, and I was getting some good feedback, and started writing more material, and I used to do a lot of competitions, and I kind of figured out how to win competitions, at least to get out of what they call the heats. And there's a book called the Guide to Stand Up. I studied this book. A woman called Judy Carter is kind of considered the gold standard for stand up, and she sort of said, if there's something about you that's strange,
Mhm.
and not strange, it's just like different, you should mention it within the first 30 seconds if you can, because people will be waiting for it. They're like, when is he going to mention that thing? So the fact that I had an Irish accent, you just, they're not going to really pay attention to you until you mention something about being Irish. So the trick is to get to say that as fast as you can. And then it's like this sort of, milestone in their head that they go, now I can concentrate on the rest of this thing that he's mentioned it. So
Yeah.
you being Iranian could be something, or, if you have like a funny scar or something that kind of people can't stop looking at. As long as you cover it very early, you get out of it. And it was all like these weird things, like, particularly in competition, you have a lot of people who will tell this long rambling story with a good punchline, but it's a long rambling story. It's like, no, people want to just like be, you're not going to win against the guy who's coming out with like three jokes a minute, they're just like,
Yeah.
so, so competitions like, which kind of got very tiring for me, is like, it's just a speed bag of trying to get the jokes out. But the problem is it works. It actually worked, and the goal would be that you kind of get out of the competitions and you get noticed by bookers, and then bookers kind of know that you're of quality, and then that would lead on to proper gigs, which I kind of got to, and started getting some paid gigs, if you like, got a few corporates out of it, um, but all the time, like, the money is like tiny. It's I
Yeah.
wasn't giving up my engineering day job at the time.
Did you get to this level that you start that makes you start thinking, oh, it could be my career, or it looks like it's stronger than my engineering role. I want to
Um,
follow this one as the main one.
I did. I was well. I got to Sydney Comedy Festival. That's kind of more like, you don't have quite a university for comedy, but I always kind of say, like, a local comedy festival is like your degree, and then something like Edinburgh, or which is on phone, or Melbourne is like a master's, and then if you get your own special, that's like your doctorate. So those are kind of like the tiers. So I kind of had worked up. I did my about 5 years, and I did a Sydney Comedy Festival, and I did my first kind of half hour of material. And what's supposed to happen after you've done an hour, or done a show? You're supposed to retire all that material. Like, it's like an unwritten rule, but you're supposed to, if you ever come back again, it's meant to be brand new hour. So I kind of had this material that had been working up for like 3 or 4 years, and I was like, okay, that has to go in a bin in some ways. I have to start a new hour, and that was kind of okay. That was actually hard, because you have a lifetime to do of work to kind of, for the first half hour or hour, it was actually kind of hard to sit down and say, okay, I got to write a completely brand new hour, and that was daunting. I wasn't quite ready, and I had some. So it was probably that work was kind of getting complicated. There was legal issues with people suing people in the company, and we were put on gardening leave for a while, and then we were brought back, and then we went. So I found it very hard to write at that time in general. Uh, and I used to never talk about work actually as material. That was the strange thing. I never talked about being an engineer. I never discussed anything about what I worked, because I thought that was like, no one would be interested. And it was only towards the end I started kind of talking about little things at work. And
Yeah.
then I realized there was a whole vein of material that I'd kind of been avoiding. So it was only afterwards I realized, that's probably where I should have gone, um, if I was looking for a new hour. And just all the crazy, bizarro stuff you kind of see at work, like, what was the thing that used to drive me crazy? Like these, I don't feel like I have as like a stand up meeting. Like, a stand up meeting is meant to be something that it's uncomfortable. It's meant to be something that it incentivizes everybody to shut up and get out of there as fast as you can. That's the whole point of standing. And these guys are doing like 40, 50 minute stand-ups, and it's just like, do you not understand? That's what a stand-up is, and um, okay, I didn't quite get to write all that material, but uh, it was just these bizarre things, kind of, and everyone, when you start kind of talking about, like, everyone's seeing these bizarre kind of, I suppose, like, when you and I kind of migrated into Intel, I'd never really actually worked in such a big corporate entity like that, and just all the kind of the weird contradictions. You remember, like, the covers you would have to put on your cups to walk around, and then and
Yes.
because it's a yeah, and because it's a kind of it is a production facility. Now, we weren't working; we were in research, so we would
Yeah.
never actually be anywhere near the corrosive chemicals or anything.
The labs, the
Um,
fabs.
but,
Yeah.
but but we could be walking down the corridor, and there could be something on the ground that looks like water, and maybe it's not water. So we were all put through that training. So they had these things. I think we just missed it. It was called like good catches. Every
Yeah.
month you were meant to come up with a good catch. It was like but I think people were just like going, "Oh, you got your cover off. That's a good catch. That's a good catch." Write it up,
Yeah.
and it was just, I don't know. It was this.
Yeah.
It was a very strange kind of world.
Yeah, it is. And I was wondering all the time, like, these big corporate are paying a lot of money, they are paying a lot of like extra stuffs, etc. But why people are exiting? I mean, I was following people, Movidius people in Intel slowly. They started to leaving Intel from the first year and slowly. I didn't stay the 4 year. I left in the third year. So still I had some shares, etc. I tried to forget about them. So what I'm saying is, yeah, maybe all this kind of commitment, regulations, silos, things like that make people, no, I want to come back to startup. Everything is free. We have freedom.
Oh well, I mean, there's a variety of issues. Well, I suppose that one of the big problems we suffered from, I think, was it was their corporate responsibility to make sure whatever's inside our heads was outside our heads. That if any one of us, you want to make sure that no one had any secrets. So I really think that they were incentivized to make sure that we were made replaceable. And I kind of ran into a number of instances where
Very
you
good
you were
point.
being put to the side, but it was a practical reason why you're being put to the side. But it was very frustrating at the same time, and
Yeah,
uh, and I think that frustrated some people. They kind of were used to, I'll just spin up a thing and I'll get it done. And it's like, no, no, you have to put in a requisition, and then it goes in, and 2 weeks later, still hasn't been done yet. Oh, it's on the list. It's like, I would have had this. What was it even? I can't even remember what I put in. I was going to look at it for 2 seconds. So
yeah,
I think that kind of I think that frustrated some people as well.
yeah. Very interesting. So, what did you get from those kind of stand-up activities? I mean, did it help you at all in terms of your engineering role, your life, your career at all?
Oh, I think so. I have kids now, so one of the best dad jokers in the world. Oh, Dad, stop! But no, I did find like I w- I wasn't necessarily one of those notorious engineers who was badly social, but I had become badly socialized. Wasn't interacting with people, and I was kind of going into work and not talking to anyone because I didn't have to, and then I was going home without talking to anyone, and it was kind of beginning to frustrate me. And then I found it kind of it reopened me. I not only did it reopen me back up, I kind of had I wasn't match fit anymore. I kind of nearly had to learn how to kind of socialize again, and it really helped me that because like one of the big things about comedy, the 5 minutes on stage is nothing in comparison to the amount of work it takes to get on stage. Like I say, it's easy to get on, as in they will put you on, but you have to like constantly be out there asking and going to places and finding people and talking to them and convincing you to put them on, and maybe you performed in this place and it turns out that place had some problem with this place, so you mightn't get on, and you say no, no, that's their problem, and the weird politics. So yeah, I found out kind of when I kind of got back into the workplace back here, I was much more able to manage it than I had been before. And then I kind of I started. I think just before I left Intel, I actually did a few Python courses. I gave a few Python courses, and I think some people could see the performance skills came through. You have to do it to time. You have to see if you're losing the audience. You make sure that they're keeping up. And it was almost exactly the same as running a comedy room. It's like the material has to be interesting, and you have to make sure that you're kind of keeping everyone up. And so I kind of been looking into doing more courses since then because I think being able to explain even technical ideas in an interesting way isn't as easy as it sounds. Like when I was in college, I used to um, tutor maths physics, and say, oh, here's the problem, and say, okay, I'd write up the answer, and I go, well, look, what happens if the thing, and I'd be like, that's the answer, and it's like that's not really what they're here for. They're here to kind of you to explain it to them. So that kind of trying to make sure that it's understandable, and it's not that you understand it, it's that they understand it. So and comedy writing is all about editing. It's like if you don't explain the joke, if you don't do your setup, they won't get the punchline. And I learned that the hard way. It's like I had this great joke, no one laughed, and it's like okay, because I'm either rushing it or not explaining it correctly or coming at it wrong, and then you begin to and they always say writing is editing. If you can take it out, take it out. If it's excessive to the explanation, then get rid of it. So understanding that there is power in brevity as well, and some people are like endless wafflers, and it's like, the like that can lose people as well.
Very interesting point. Yeah. Recently, I was conversating with the colleague, and I was saying that's the matter of content generation. I mean, if you are in a meeting or if someone invites you for insight for a collaboration or something like that, assuming you have some sort of the background in the topic and you're kind of expert in the topic, then afterward, that's the matter of content creation. If you want to call it presentation, it is considered as one of the important soft meta level skills for the technical people, but I would prefer to call it content creation. I mean, if you ask someone to write an article, a blog post for you, 600 words about like software engineering versus hardware engineering, it looks like to me the same. I mean, if you are in a meeting room, in a meeting with the boards, with like investors, with whoever, that's the matter of how you can generate like you know with good content that grab the attentions. And it comes as I understood from you, this kind of activities can help a lot people. But the
Yeah.
bizarre part is, but the bizarre part is why it has happened to me a couple of times to some of the colleagues that I have felt they have kind of some,
Mhm.
sense of humor. And I told them, why not? You are trying to be like stand-up comedian. They were saying like, what kind of you are fooling me, or you think I'm not scientist? You want to push me toward the stand-up comedy? You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
the secret I found to comedy wasn't actually necessarily the jokes. Everyone's got jokes. Everybody's got jokes. It's the confidence. It's going on stage and projecting to the room that for the next 5 minutes or the next half hour, I've got this. You know, relax. I'm looking after this, and you don't have to worry. I've got control. And the best comics just exude that. That the people can feel comfortable, and that kind of confidence is kind of the thing that I think is the power. So I found this like later, like when I walk into a room and I may be nervous about something, but if you don't kind of telegraph it, and you just say, look, I don't know the answer, but I know I can figure it out, and
Yeah,
as long as you're kind of they believe you, and you can kind of walk away like and go, what the hell was that? Jesus, I don't know what I'm going to do. But as long as you don't do that in the room, it's amazing how much power you get out of that.
that's very interesting. With the same colleague, actually, I was conversating, and he paused me for a while and told me something that made me thinking deeply. And he said, if you ask two people, an American and Irish, they are working in McDonald's. And if you ask the Irish guy, would say working in McDonald's. But if you ask the American guy, he would say, I'm working in a restaurant every day. We are serving blah 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 blah. And he said, Americans, they know how to sell themselves. While I'm not sure if it is a good idea. So why people feel like guilty of trying to sell them, to express them, you know, particularly if you're a technical person, they look like they are degrading the quality, their technical quality if they do that.
This could get into whole Irish culture. I mean,
Yeah.
the Roman Catholic guilt is kind of baked into us. Though to be fair, in Australia they have it. Like in Australia, they have this thing that, it's called tall poppy syndrome. Which I think in Ireland we have something called never mind the begrudgers. He's like, there's always somebody that wants to cut you down. Who does he think he is? And it's not so much that you wouldn't have confidence. It's just there's always someone there ready to kind of like snipe at you, and it's a cultural thing. They're everywhere, and I would have been affected by it growing up, and they're still out there. But like I began to understand, and that maybe is what Americans like. You just have to have confidence. As long as you're confident in yourself, it doesn't matter what they can say. It's like, you can say whatever you want. I don't care. You're wrong, or at least I think you're wrong. But I do think to kind of have that confidence, um, to be able to kind of say, look, no, I know this, and I know I can either do it or I know this is right, and just not to have that kind of niggliness. That maybe they're right. Maybe I don't know this. I think that's probably one of the big differences of Americans. That inane confidence, and even then we'll still try and cut them down. It's like, who do they think they are? Uh, But
Yeah.
I think it's bleeding back to us. We, particularly people like us, who, I've spent most of my career working with Americans. I spent time there, and you begin to understand. So, like here, I found, like, you know, you get like these kind of weird passive aggressive complaints. Oh, you're doing it that way, are you? What's wrong with it? Oh, never, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Whereas Americans would be much more like, oh, I don't like the look of this at all. Why are you doing it that way? And it's that kind of directness as well.
Yeah.
It's so so I would, having spent more time around the Americans, I would kind of come more in at the, no, I don't like the look of this, and then you have to split the line between, like, this isn't a critique of you, your personality. This is maybe a critique of the work you've produced, and let's figure out how we can fix that. But again, you always have to kind of walk that line. It's like, okay, they might think I'm having a go at them. It's like, it's not, because they still have that kind of confidence issue themselves. So that's I mean, we're all learning that. Like, Ireland famously monocultural. Someone comes back from holidays with a tan. That's you know that's like amazing, because they look so different to everyone else who's like white. Whereas now, like when I moved back to Ireland, like the Ireland I left in 2000 and the Ireland I came back to in 2012, were like so different. The amount of Asians and Africans and Poles and everything that were living, like Dublin. 20% of Dublin was now non-native born, which was kind of not the place I grew up in. And I think the place is better for it. But it was also kind of jarring. In like,
Yeah.
you're walking down the street, and uh, you can't understand what people are saying because they're speaking a different language than you. That never used to be the way.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, that was quite common for me, like living in Australia. So it wasn't unusual. But this place is changing.
Very interesting point. Yeah, there are the cultural things, but in two of the episodes of my Persian podcast, I experienced in one of them, the guest with a PhD, a lot of experience in the in German industry, etc. She told me, "Can I ask you for some mentorship, please?" And I said, "What is that?" And she said, "Oh, I feel guilty if I present myself. I feel like they should understand what I'm good at." And we went through that. That was something cultural from family, etc. And another guest told me, after like 3 hours, my other podcast is like 3 hours, 4 hours episodes, crazy deep episodes in Persian. But that guest actually in that episode told me after the episode that that was the hardest thing, one of the hardest thing in my life I have done, attending the podcast in front of audience and speaking for 4 hours. Then I asked her why you attended then, and she said I wanted to challenge myself because I felt like I need to do that. So based on whatever we have discussed, it looks like we have brought good examples. It looks like we need to act, we need to face the music, we need to do whatever we feel discomfort about.
Mm. Yeah, but like, when you're younger, I think it's easier. It should be easier. You do find, like, people of our vintage. Yeah, we have families, we have kids, we have houses, mortgages. You kind of don't have the opportunity maybe to take the risk anymore, because if I stay with these guys, particularly like let's take Intel for example right now. Like, it's both of us left long before these major redundancies started to happen. But now Ireland, looks like, has been largely spared, and I think that's mainly to do with because they built a brand new fab there. It's the most advanced fab in the world. So, I think they're losing like 200 people out of 5,000, which is nothing in comparison to the absolute carnage that's happening in America, with thousands of people losing their jobs. But a lot of these people, that they'd get into a kind of a slot, they'd become the expert in that slot, and they wouldn't want to rock the boat. And Intel's notorious for, here's your quarterly bonus, but your annual bonus comes at a different time from your quarterly bonuses, and then your RSUs vest at a different time, and they're constantly feeding you these little nibbles of, oh, well, I'll just wait for this one. Oh, I'll just wait for this one. I'll just wait for this one. I'll just wait for this one. Which uh, I don't know what your motivation was like. If I don't get off this now, I'll find it very hard to get off later. Because you've got more and more to lose. Um, and I think it's hard to kind of to take those risks when you get a bit older. I mean, you should, but I understand why people kind of struggle with it.
Yeah. Maybe parents, that's something parents should start thinking about to teach their children, because I don't know if you compare it with with our generation, how's the situation in Ireland nowadays, and how parents try to encourage kids actually to be like more uh, riskable, try to test out the things, try to not rely on the corporation jobs, etc.
Well, I grew up in a different time. It doesn't exist anymore. I can't speak to your experience, but when you grew up in the 80s in Ireland, you were told you have to leave. You're going to try and get into college. You kind of get the best results and get out. Go to America, go to Australia, go to the UK. None of us were ever expected to stay. And then I was quite fortunate. Like literally, when I went into college in '94, people were still leaving the country a lot because there was no jobs. And then by the time I graduated, they said, "Oh, there's a job for you here," and I was like, "I don't know. I was planning to go." I kind of built up my head to go that I was keen. I was still keen to go, but um, there was a period of time now where like so much kind of changed in this country so fast that the culture didn't catch up with it. Like this kind of push you when you could actually stay, it didn't quite adapt to it the same way. Like they kind of constantly go on about like the housing crisis in Ireland, which there is. But it's for something like 90 years of the state, they'd only ever had a situation where the population was declining. Why would they build more houses when there's more people leaving the country than arriving? They had an excess of houses for such a long period of time that the government's kind of process for building new houses just didn't exist because it didn't have to. And then boom, switched, and now they're kind of now we have to build 100,000 houses a year. Oh, how do we do that? So and I think like the big problem with AI is like so much is changing now. So I've three kids. One is 10, uh, 5 and 2. So not to worry about them yet. But the 10-year-old, she will be looking at university in the next 6 or 7 years. And I'm trying to figure out, well, what would I advise her to do that she could study, that she will be able to have a career that will take her up to retirement age, whatever that is, which could be 75 now, the way they keep pushing out. And I honestly, I don't know. It's kind of it's a bit of a kind of a conundrum for me what the good advice is, because whatever advice we were being given back in the 80s, 90s, I don't think is true anymore. It's going to be different. But I don't know what if anyone knows what that different is. And I personally think it's maybe a callback to you come out with a more general skill set than a specific skill set.
Yeah, being a generalist, having more meta-level skills, and so on and so forth. For myself, my daughter is 8, and what we are trying to do, we are trying to support her in terms of trying and testing several different things. Like, for example, she's very good in learning languages. She
Hmm.
already knows Persian and English very well. She speaks English better than me and my wife. And so our plan is to let her learn a new language every 2 years, of course, if she's interested in. She has tried swimming. She has recently started gymnastic. And what I think is, I don't want to force her, but what I think is, if she has the opportunity by 18 years old to try several different things, and then out of that, by that age, she would have something in hand to start thinking of, rather than 18 years old, just should I go to Trinity College Dublin or University College Dublin or University College Cork or something like that, and then what would be the major I should do to hopefully get the job or something. I would say, for example, she's very good in speaking, debating, writing, and so on and so forth. I don't know. Maybe she would be a writer, speaker, presenter, comedian. I don't know. And who knows? Maybe she can make more money rather than her dad.
Well, my other kind of problem with the kind of existing system, which I think hopefully changes, like, yeah, I get this. Like, you're an engineer, but you're also a comedian. How does that work? I mean, I think that's literally the might have been the message you sent me, and it's like, but like that shouldn't be strange. It like why do we have to be one thing? Why can't we be many things? Even more than two things. This kind
Yeah.
of that you are this only thing. And I did kind of notice it a little bit during COVID when people were trying to question the doctors and say, "Well, you wouldn't understand. You're not a doctor." And I said, "Okay, but I'm not a doctor, but I have an education. Can you explain it to me? You know, that I
Yeah.
can be informed." But it's like, no, you will never understand because you haven't gone this, that, and the other. And it definitely had the conversation had switched to uh, specialists. If you're not in this area, you're not entitled to an opinion or an ability to even comment on it. And you kind of see it in other stuff like all the time. And I kind of said, well, I did comedy, and I was a surf lifesaver for a while, and I'm a cyclist. I could I can strip a bike down. I could, being a bike mechanic as well if I absolutely had to. I said, why any of those things are not compatible, And I have found something amazing in that nearly every engineer I've ever met has always had something extra. Most of them are musicians. They're in a band. They play guitar. They've gone out and done that. I had another guy. He was a serious artist, like proper doing portraits and stuff and getting paid for it. There always like is that kind of thing at the side, and every time it's like, why you do that as well? And it's like it's considered unusual. And it's like, well, it shouldn't be unusual. It should be normal.
Very good point. But the challenge is some of my former student, as well as a friend of mine who's living in London. So the former student, they used to be very professional musician, like they used to play violin and so on and so forth. One day, one of them asked me, "Tell me if I should follow the engineering or music. Which one should I follow?" And I faced him with a simple question, and I asked him, "Which one do you enjoy more?" He said, "Music." "Which one do you make more?" He said, "Music." I said, "Okay, you should follow the music." But still, I see he's struggling to introduce himself as an engineer too. Or my friend in London from 5 years old, he's doing music and he's masters in several musical instruments, and he has composed music for bands and
Hmm.
international one and so on and so forth. He has finished a PhD in artificial intelligence. His LinkedIn is open to work and he's looking for professional AI job. But the reality is one night playing Santur, he makes the money of a month of working in engineering side. But I don't know
Yeah.
why he is still looking for. Maybe it is okay to do several things in parallel. Yeah, that's the dilemma.
Yeah, I have to say I did always find it hard to. It's an engineering phrase, but context switch between being an engineer and a comedian. So
Yeah,
some of these roles they don't they're orthogonal. They don't exist at the same time. You very rarely would have a case where you need to do stand up at the same time an engineering job is happening. So it'll be one in the morning and one in the afternoon. I always found it very hard to kind of stop being an engineer and stop being thinking so analytical and then kind of performance now. And some days it was just too hard. Other times it was fine. But I think the other problem that you kind of reminded me of is like, unfortunately, like I used to be a great fan of comedy. I used to watch a lot of comedy. Uh, but when I took it up, it became more like a job, and I didn't really enjoy it anymore. I was looking at it from a too technical an eye that you're looking at the process and not the jokes. I see what he's doing there. Oh, yeah. And in some ways, I can't go back. Once you've kind of gone over this line, it's very hard to go back. So some of these people is like your hobby maybe should be your hobby, or your enjoyment maybe should be your enjoyment. But if you do too much of it, it might change what it is.
yeah, very interesting one. By the way, while we are here, we discuss a lot of things. So during the COVID, I bought this book from an Irish
Mm.
author, a
Yep.
magician, and he has an interesting story. He was saying, I was born and grown up in a small town in Ireland, and my family they thought I should do a science degree, but I was really passionate about magic, and I used to perform. I used to make money out of it, and then finally I made it a job. I'm a magician now instead of being
Mm.
scientist. So that's really interesting challenge, as you said, culturally. In a lot of cultures, we are facing that. In my culture, it used to be you cannot make a life from football. So do this engineering and play football in parallel. You cannot make job from music. Do this and parallel. Why not? In parallel, you can do music. Why not? You
Well,
can
it's
do
like
it.
there'd be some people like I tell the story probably a bit too much, but Um, I went to school. I went to So I grew up in Dublin and moved to Cork. I went to primary school with Colin Farrell, and I went to secondary school with Killian Murphy. When I grew up, the only famous Irish person internationally was Pierce Brosnan. And he was a fluke. He moved to London when he was like 16. He's barely Irish anymore, but he was. And it's like, that's it. He's got the only actor role that an Irish man will ever get, ever, you know. And and so not only were Irish people able to get these roles, they were able to get these international roles where they're getting, nominated for Oscars. I went to the same bloody schools as them. So, I know, they came out of the exact same ecosystem that I was in. So there was nothing special there. They all kind of started from the same point, and it was possible to go from those places to, Oppenheimer. And I still, every time I see Oppenheimer, that was on the side of the bus, the picture of Killian on the side of a bus, all I could see was our science teacher, our physics teacher. You know, it's like, Mr. Murphy, what do you think you're doing? That's all I could see.
Yeah, that's what I noticed during my Persian podcast. Actually, over there, I realized there are two group of people. One group of people, they could be good in several different things, and the other group of people, they are just good in a very minor number of things. So these people are luckiest people because whatever they try doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work until something like acting, music, etc. works perfectly, and they shine. But for the people, several different things works. They are in trouble because they feel like, oh, I can do this, I can do math, I can do physics, I can be engineer, and so on and so forth. Anyway, good guys, we are in the episode with Dave Keeshan. Very interesting conversation we have had by far. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you have enjoyed that. If you like the conversation, please like the episode, make comments, share it, because Google doesn't have the knowledge to know what we have discussed with Dave. If you like it and share it, Google will start understanding what to do. The last topic I want to raise with you and then finish the episode is the kind of retirement. So it seems like it's getting sexy and interesting terms like fire, if I'm correct, financial independence, retire early things, and people are trying to, yeah, let's finish it. I don't want to work for anyone. I want to finish it. I want to have freedom, personal, financial, location,
Mhm.
blah blah, etc. What do you think about it? Should we pressure ourselves on it, or
Well, I was quite fortunate in that my trip to Australia, which wasn't the purpose of going there, we came back quite financially better off than Irish. So we came back. We were saving for Australian houses, which are so much more expensive. So Irish houses were cheap in comparison. This is 10 years ago.
okay?
Uh, so so that kind of idea, you can kind of go somewhere and maybe pull down a bigger income and then come back. And there is a guy. He wrote the book called The 4 Hour Work Week, which is it's more about it. It's actually a book I think a lot of people in computer science and engineering should read. It's all about it. It's really all about automation, how you automate kind of aspects of your life. But he has this kind of theory that you shouldn't kind of retire at the end. Get to 65 and retire. You should have like these micro retirements, um, because I do mountain biking and whitewater kayaking and snowboarding and all that sort of stuff, which, well, I don't do as much anymore because I've accrued a bit of damage. But you're not going to be 65 and taking up snowboarding. You might get to the end, and there's certain things you can't do when you get there. So this kind of idea of uh, I think getting to something and stopping is kind of a bit strange to me, but I do kind of think the idea of taking extended periods of time off, if you can financially do it, is kind of more what I'm interested in. And when we were in Australia, like one of the biggest life hacks I did, like it used to be, we had standard holidays, like 20-25 days a year. And then because Ireland was so far away from Australia, we spent 18 months of working solid, and then you bank all your holidays, and then you come back, and there's such a long way back, and then you spend all the time here, and then you find out, life has changed, and you go back, and then you start banking all your holidays again, and all you're doing is, you weren't really going on holidays, you're just coming back to Ireland. And then I realized, it's a lot more common in Oz, but you can just take unpaid leave. And I just said, like, if I don't come in for 3 months, will you just not pay me? Yeah. And so So we started just taking extended trips, and we would come back to Ireland, do maybe the month at home with the family, and then we went off to Europe and traveled around Europe. And I think we came back through Asia and stayed in Thailand, and I think to Singapore and a few other things. And that was the biggest kind of like, why didn't we do this before? Like we spent years kind of doing that, going back and banking holidays, and we did it a few times towards the end, just extended trips. So I would kind of like to take more extended time off. The only critique of that is it does seem to be kind of an apex and a fall off. Particularly where we are now in our careers is probably the apex of our earning potential. So if one is taking time off, you may not come back to find the same kind of money as there was when you left, and to balance that up. And I'm still not too sure about that. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of I don't know. I'm very fortunate about my parents are still alive. They're pushing like as almost pushing 80. I think people like us should be planning, at least financially planning, to get to 90. You may not get there. You might go on the snowboard off the edge of a cliff, but you might not get to 90. But I think if you're not planning financially to get there, like I'm 50 next year. I don't think I could kind of retire and not work for 40 years. I'd be driven demented. So in some ways, I like work that's interesting. It's as much keeps me sane as much as it pays the bills. But
Yeah, very
I haven't.
interesting. That's another interesting aspect of our life to think about these things. Some people start thinking about that too late. I mean, younger generation hopefully can start thinking about it at least. Very good. Thank you very much, Dave. That was a very interesting conversation. What is your last final words take away from this episode before we finish the episode?
I don't know. I just to get out there, and in fact, I didn't mention I had a podcast for a while.
Yeah,
I didn't mention that at all. I
two
was
of
a
them.
podcast, which I'm not going to get into too much detail. It happened around COVID, which turned out everybody. I had a baby then, so I was stopping comedy, and I started wanting to do a podcast, and then COVID hit, and everybody did a podcast at the same time. So I was
Yeah,
completely swamped. But like a lot of times when they people like you might notice, like, how do I start a podcast? Do I get a mic? Do I get this mic, or
yeah,
well, how about the software? And
yeah,
like the line was like, what do I do? Just start, just start. You have a phone, you can start recording it. The quality won't be great, but get going. Yeah, because so many people will just like wait until everything is ready before they start. No, 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 just start now, and figure it out as you go. So, and that's true for anything. If you're thinking about doing anything, just start something.
very good point. Thank you very much for sharing that. Good. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for listening to us. Until the next time, we'll say goodbye with Dave.
Right.
Bye bye.
Good luck.